is all about. I'll give some highlights from the 2 workshops that we've done so far. I have some interactive activities planned where I'm going to be engaging people in the audience here in the community in some priority setting, which you will be able to do using an interactive platform that I'll introduce in just a moment. And then I'll finally just share about our upcoming workshops, because we have 2 more workshops as part of this series. And so this visioning process is one that the MSBA requires for each of its feasibility studies. It's schools that are in the feasibility study stage. And it's really about big picture priority setting to look at educational priorities as well as architectural possibilities and priorities. And the purpose is to make sure that the district is getting the most value out of this MSBA opportunity. We want to also be gently pushing people's thinking forward about what's possible, because lots of things have changed in terms of the way we think about school buildings being designed these days. And I'll talk a little bit about that and share some of those ideas. But really, it's about gathering as much information as possible about Wakefield Memorial High School, what the school values, what the community values, what the cutting edge is in terms of the programming that's going on at the school, and how a renovated or new facility would be able to really help the district move its agenda forward and also position it for many decades to come to have a forward-thinking high school building that will really serve as a center for the community, a hub for the community. And in this process, we've engaged initially the educational leadership team in a conversation about big picture priorities and strategy. We have an educational working group with about 33 folks in it. I'll talk about that in a second. And we have this community forum and another one coming up. And it's a strategic process that is really kind of, again, about gathering as much information as possible, sharing best practice ideas. So on the visioning team, we have a group that is participating in these 4 workshops, and you can see here the dates here. So we've done the first of the first 2 of the 4 workshops, and the next workshops will be happening on the 16th and the 30th of November. In the group of 33 participants, we have a mixture of teachers, administrators, WMHS parents, community partners, and community members. And this was put out as a notice to the community that anybody who was interested in participating could do so. And so we always like to get a cross-section of folks in this conversation, but then to take the ideas that are being sort of cultivated within this forum and share it with the larger community to be able to get people's responses and feedback. Now, we've done these workshops in a virtual format. We had the original kickoff meeting with the leadership team in person. And then it was decided that due to social distancing necessities and also wanting to have a larger group and wanting to make this available to people and more convenient for people, that we would do these workshops virtually. We've been doing them for the last 1.5 years virtually, very successfully. We make them highly interactive. We get into a lot of small group discussions, and they're really very focused and hands-on. All of the information is collected in a Google document that we then can reference. And we use this interactive software called Mentimeter for real-time kind of feedback and conversation. This is a lot about developing a narrative as part of this feasibility study. The MSBA requires the district to create an education plan, and they want to make sure that the language that is in the education plan really aligns with the vision that is being created by the community. So we're looking at design priorities and goals. We're looking at desired adjacencies within the building, and we're also referencing the MSBA space template for high school design projects and looking at how to make maximum use of it. Now, all of the notes that are being consolidated from our workshops can be found at the website right here on the district website. So you can access all of not only the notes, but the handouts from each of the visioning sessions. We want to make these as transparent as possible. We start every workshop with a review of the notes from the last workshop and checking for understanding, did we get it right? And as I said, this is really kind of a sequential process that really builds upon itself. I should say that my background is I am a licensed architect. I've worked on over 75 public school projects in Massachusetts and many more around the country. But I also am an educator who spent the best part of the last 25 years working in and with schools to develop curriculum or teach, or I was an assistant principal as well. So I'm really interested in working with the group to help call, sort of what are people excited about when they think about future forward teaching and learning at Wakefield Memorial High School, and how does that connect to ideas about how to make the most flexible building possible? Now, a couple of big picture themes that I wanted to share before we get into our own priority setting activity. For any new or MSBA job, so what I will say is, as part of this feasibility study, we have to look at a renovated school with an addition, or a completely new school. We're looking at establishing the big picture priorities and using that as the lens then through which to evaluate each of those different options. But any renovated or new school is going to have certain features that are very important, I think, to understand. We need to be ADA compliant. We will certainly be thinking about safe entry and security features, both passive and active. We need to provide thermal comfort within the building, and that includes cooling as well as heating. We are going to be creating a sustainable building, and both passive and active sustainable features as well. This comes with new technology and furniture, and all classrooms will be well sized, and we know how important natural light is. So we're going to get natural light in all of those classrooms. So other big picture themes when we think about designing schools these days is that we want to make them flexible and adaptable. We want to make sure that they are fully wired and learning can happen anywhere within the building. We want to look at creating both small scale and large scale communities, so places where students feel connections to a smaller learning community, but also to the whole. We want to extend the learning beyond the classroom. The classroom is still the basic building block, but we want to be able to use any part of the building for teaching and learning and create varied and connected spaces. We're also very aware that we want to be practical here. This is not about being trendy. It's about being practical, economical, and creating the most flexible and adaptable building that will serve your district and community for decades to come. So this is really an opportunity for the district to reflect on their agenda, to envision a forward-thinking building. And we're trying to encourage people, especially at this point, to be aspirational in their thinking. The design team is meeting with people on the ground at the school, talking to all sorts of focus groups about what their specific needs are. But these are big picture priorities that we're establishing in this process. And I'm going to share some of the priorities that have been established, and I'm going to ask people to contribute additional priorities. So we have 3 sets of priorities: educational, architectural, and community. Now, obviously, they're all very connected, but it's helpful sometimes to break them apart to think about when we're doing priority setting. So I have 1 page for each of these of priorities that have been set thus far, envisioning some of the big picture themes that have been coming up. And then I'm going to open up for people in the audience to offer some of their own ideas. In terms of educational practices, support for emerging practices is something that has come up a lot in the conversation. Making sure that any new or renovated building is going to support practices as they evolve. Part of that is more opportunities for collaborative and interdisciplinary learning. We tended in the past to design high schools in very discipline-specific and siloed ways, and we're moving towards much more interdisciplinary connections. Student engagement and inspiration. We want a building that's going to be inspiring for its inhabitants and really promote full engagement. It needs to be inclusive in terms of the school culture. So meeting students where they're at, Students have very different learning needs, and so we need to vary the kind of methodologies that we use with students and the spaces that support them. Special education and resources need to be dispersed throughout the building, and that's part of this inclusive approach. And we need to promote the integrated use of technology. So technology is there when you need it, where you need it, as a tool. So those are some of the big picture educational priorities. And now I wanted to open up for the people in the audience to share some of these priorities. Now, these are all anonymous. This is a program called Menti.com. And if you open up a browser, either on your laptop or your desktop or on your smartphone, and go to Menti.com, it will give you a place to plug in a code. And the code here is this number, 40484642. And when you do that, you will come to this page, and it will give you the opportunity to submit your thoughts. And so we're going to start with educational priorities. We have another page for architectural priorities, and then we have one for community priorities. So I'm going to just open up for a few minutes. We'll start to see these things appear on the screen. Now, I have about a 35-minute kind of presentation here with you. We're going to open up for some Q&A at the end, so please save your questions until that time. But please feel free to contribute your thinking here to what your particular educational priorities are as you think of a new WMHS facility or renovated facility. And if anybody's having trouble to access this, you could maybe drop a note in the chat, but hopefully it will be pretty easy to access. And this is how we've been doing our workshops. With the 33 participants, we've been getting into small breakout groups, but we've also been doing a lot of this kind of checking in with hearing from people, getting them to contribute their ideas, and then we see things on the screen and we can discuss them. Yeah, collaboration is definitely something that's come up a lot in our workshops thus far. And when we think about collaboration, I think that means different things at different times. We certainly want opportunities for teachers to collaborate with each other, and as we said, to work in interdisciplinary ways. We also want opportunities for students to collaborate in small groups, in large groups, and for teachers and students to collaborate together. So one of the other big picture themes that we see in high school buildings and in school buildings is that we're moving away from buildings that feel kind of institutional, like locker-lined, double-loaded corridors, to buildings that feel more like a workplace, that feel more like there are varied and connected kind of spaces, large spaces, small spaces. So classes that prepare students for college as well as for life. And that's been a theme that's come up a lot in terms of focus on careers and career pathways and hands-on learning. Spaces for student agency. So that's a big theme in educational circles because when we talk about 21st century skills, they assume that students are operating in more kind of independent and proactive ways, not just passive learners, but they have the ability to be active learners and they develop confidence in their own ability to do that. Equity is incredibly important, and again, that's come up. Now, as if you have the time to go and the interest to go look at the set of notes, you'll see that they're the ones that I shared were just some of the big headlines. There's about 20 pages of notes that you can leaf through that show all of these different themes that have come up, all of which are mentioned here again. And flexible classroom spaces to be adaptable over time for new educational needs. And part of that also is robust technology and enough outlets and places to plug in. Outdoor learning, we learned a lot in the last year and a half about how useful that has been, but it's something we think a lot about, those indoor-outdoor connections. Okay, I'm going to move on now to the next set of architectural priorities. And the big picture themes that have been coming up, or some of them, are having an innovative and inspiring building, one that really represents the town of Wakefield and that really inspires students to feel like, wow, I'm really valued, and I have a wonderful place to be and to learn. Safety and welcome is part of that. We need to be thinking about safety, but we also want a space that feels welcoming. And there are many different ways that we can promote both of those things. An evolving and flexible building, one that can be adapted over time, that can be used in different ways. One example of that is maybe it would be able to adapt to a small learning community that has a career focus or a thematic focus, or that has an interdisciplinary approach as opposed to a discipline-specific approach. Visible learning and display, making learning public, using transparency in appropriate places to showcase some of the exciting things going on in the school. Equal access and opportunities in terms of ADA accessibility, also thinking about universal design and ease of wayfinding throughout the building, and support for inquiry-based learning in STEAM. So lots of emphasis on more hands-on learning, and STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, art, and math. It's kind of a connected approach to those disciplines, to learning about those disciplines by doing authentic project work. So I'm going to now open up for your thoughts about your top architectural priorities as you think about a renovated or new building. Yes, daylight is very important. We know lots of research shows us that actually, not only in terms of health, but in terms of student performance, daylight is incredibly important. Potential for separation of community spaces in school, that's a big one in terms of really seeing the school as a community center, a hub for community that can be safely accessed after hours and on weekends, but you can lock off parts of the building. Ease of navigation, that has a lot to do with kind of universal design approach as well. We want to be able to create different zones within the school and easy pathways to circulate the school. We're looking at hallways in very different ways. We're trying to minimize the amount of hallways and also make them wider in certain places so that they're actually not just for circulation or for between classes, but they become extended learning spaces. We'll wait for just a few more seconds here before moving on in case anyone else wants to add something. And again, all of these things have come up as themes that we're exploring with the visioning group. Okay, and finally, looking at community priorities. So a building that is a good fit for the community, that represents the community values, that feels like it fits in to the Wakefield community, that can be used safely after hours and on weekends and becomes a real hub or a resource for the community. That includes access to fields and outdoor spaces. Art, music, and performance is something that really came up a lot as being very much valued within the community of the school. And so really wanting to support that. And as that connects also to interacting with the community and providing venues for the community for performance and for being able to access multi-purpose spaces, and finally parking and site circulation as being very important, which we're certainly going to be thinking about. So I'll open up for one more. This is the last of our priority setting prompts here. So as you think about community priorities, please share the things that are top of mind for you. Okay. Net zero emissions, no gas heat. Well, we're certainly going to be talking about the approach to sustainability, and that is definitely part of the conversation. Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. We've definitely been talking about all of these spaces as being accessible to the community and an important resource for the community. And definitely maker spaces and the idea of STEAM has been a theme that's come up a lot. The MSBA in their space template provides also spaces to support that kind of programming, as many schools are interested in that kind of hands-on approach to learning about the STEM fields. Multimodal transportation plan. Mm-hmm. Definitely. And access to recreational spaces during non-school time. Okay. Great. Well, I'm going to move on now and talk a little bit about some of the themes that came up as we spoke about future-ready teaching and learning. Now, when we say future-ready, we're thinking about how can we best support students to be both career and college-ready, and to develop the confidence to participate in our, global economy. So the 6 R's are very important still: the reading, writing, and arithmetic, making things rigorous, relevant for students, and establishing opportunities for relationships with adults. The 4 C's, or the 5 C's, if you include citizenship, are baked in now to the next gen standards and Common Core. And they really speak to students being able to learn higher order thinking skills in the process of applying the content that they're learning to real life situations. So that connects to the idea of head and hand, problem and project-based learning. It's not like that's anything new, but there is a huge emphasis on that now. That's also what enables us to engage students in all different ways in curriculum as well, because many students learn better when they're actually applying what they are learning to things that connect to something that feels authentic to them. And social emotional learning is a theme. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. That is certainly on everybody's mind in schools. So we're looking at more student-centered and interdisciplinary kind of approaches to teaching and learning, technology where you need it, when you need it, being differentiated, and meeting kids where they're at, STEM and STEAM, which implies that if you're doing more project-based learning, you need environments that allow you to work with a lot of materials, and good storage is important. Social emotional learning is really about mental health and students developing more self-awareness, making responsible decisions, being part of a democratic community within the school. So there's actually a lot that not only the school program, but the building can do to help to facilitate that, a sense of belonging and ownership. And these are not just nice ideas, they're very much connected to workforce development and the kinds of skills that, if you look at the top 10 skills that the World Economic Forum says employers will be looking for, they're looking for them now and they'll be looking for them in 2025. They're all these higher order thinking skills that imply that students have developed the confidence to be more proactive learners. Someone had mentioned agency previously, and it's all about developing that agency. So we worked with the leadership and the visioning group to talk about the things that were most important at Wakefield Memorial High School. And this is sort of the list we came up with as we're thinking about, again, getting to know the school as well as possible. These are the top 6 things that, that WMHS is really focused on in terms of social emotional learning, providing college and career pathways, helping students to make real world connections, differentiating instruction to meet students where they're at, a more student-centered, personalized approach, and universal design for learning, which connects to all of these things. And then in the workshop, we did an activity in small groups where 5 different small groups each came up with their own lists of future-ready learning goals that they would create a poster to go in every high school classroom. And these are the things they came up with as most important to them. So that idea of global citizenship, inventive thinking and problem solving, self-directed learning, social emotional intelligence, being an effective communicator, being literate in terms of digital access, collaboration, being able to collaborate and show leadership, and of course, mastery of core academics is really sort of the foundation for all of this. So I have actually opened up here, this is another menti.com slide. If people want to just share, if you go to this page and punch in this number, you'll get an option to put in 6 different future-ready learning goals. You can look at any of the goals on this list or add things that aren't here that are important to you. We'll just wait a few minutes and let people kind of share their thinking about what future-ready learning goals are most important to you as you think about the needs of your student, your child, or the WMHS community. Okay, I'll leave this up on the screen for just another moment.
So David, we're getting a request to put the link in the chat. Is it possible to put the link in the chat?
It is, I don't know.
It's right there when you hover below whoever's hovering. Hover under the header where it says go to Menti.
Yeah, just the link to Menti.
Oh, is it just the, I thought you said link to this page.
Well, this page is, you just go to menti.com and you type in this number.
Okay, and this page will come up.
Yes, it's the same number that we were using before.
Okay,
so if people were on it, they should still be on it, but I just sent that.
Thank you.
Here. Okay. And all right, and I'm just gonna, so just from the people that have responded so far, we've got global perspective right up at, which is similar to what the group had determined was most important as well. I think we're all very aware how important that empathy is and that ability to understand and respect other people's thinking. And then a variety of these 4 C's and growth mindset, self-directed learning. All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving on here. And I'm going to just share the top 10 design patterns. So what we did in the workshop is we shared about 40 different design patterns and ways of thinking about how buildings might take shape. The kinds of approaches to design that we want to prioritize. And by sharing those 40, and we just did that in the second workshop, and we'll do another activity when we meet next week in workshop 3 to kind of take a deeper dive in this. But essentially, and I see someone actually is already punching the heart. You can actually interact with these slides if you want. by pressing a heart, a thumbs up, or a thumbs down to let us know what you think of them. And that's one of the ways that we did it in the workshop. But I'm just going to go quickly through them. I'm aware that time I know we have other things to move on to. So I'll just share the top 10 of the 40 that we discussed. And these are in priority order in terms of what the group had determined was most important. So universal design and access is about that easy wayfinding, easy travel through the building, ADA accessibility, but also using color and light and pattern to make the building not only comfortable, but easy to navigate and to use. Agile classrooms makes sense that that's going to be right up at the top of the list too. It doesn't mean we have to have a lot of bells and whistles. We want flexible furniture. Here you can see that there's electrical that pulls down from the ceiling. We've got good natural light, robust technology, some storage in behind some movable whiteboards. This actually is a movable wall between two classrooms. We might consider that here and there in a building to promote flexibility of use. Also right up at the top is this idea of extended learning spaces. So what would have been the hallway now becomes a space for teaching and learning, and to extend beyond the classroom walls. If you have a window from your classroom into this space, you can let your students out there to work in small groups. It might be a place where large group gatherings or presentations happen. Here are a couple of different examples so these are spaces that really serve to promote small school community, but also support independent or small group and large group work. Also breakout spaces. In addition to collaboration spaces like these extended learning spaces, we want spaces where students can get focused and quiet. That might look like a nook in a classroom or a nook in a hallway with access to technology and a whiteboard, or it could be a breakout room that's connected to a classroom or to two classrooms and accessible from both, where you can monitor what's going on in that room. This is a great space for tutoring, for enrichment, for differentiated targeted intervention, for small group work, for de-escalation. It's got lots of different purposes. STEM, STEAM maker spaces. These are spaces where you can do hands-on work that's connected to the STEM and STEAM programming that's going on in the school. Oftentimes that involves lots of bins of materials and sort of a more industrial kind of large tabletops. Or here, as you can see at Beverly Middle School, lots of good storage, flexible modular furniture, again, lots of access to places to plug in and technology. Classroom neighborhoods. Classroom neighborhoods are collections of classrooms that might also include something like an extended learning area or a team room, a teacher planning area, that then instead of just being a sort of a long hallway, become a neighborhood where everything is focused on, there's kind of a there. And this creates small learning communities. And we also want to be thinking about special education resources as connected to those. Welcoming arrival, thinking about when you arrive at the school, is it clear where to enter? Does it feel welcoming and friendly? But also from the inside, does it allow you to monitor who's coming in and out of the school? And are there places to sit? Are there places to get out of the rain if you're waiting to come into the building? Security and welcome, so connected to that idea of welcome, but also using passive and active security measures to make sure that there are gatekeeping mechanisms that strictly control who's coming into the school and make sure that we know when that is happening. Community access, here's an example from West Bridgewater Middle High School, where you can see that the gym, the cafe, the auditorium, the music area, and their cable access television are all located, co-located, and you can then block off the rest of the academic areas of the school. And this really becomes then a community resource, that community center that can be used after hours. This is also, by the way, a place where they make revenue for the district because they rent out this very attractive cafe space as a multi-purpose space for the community. Heart of school, thinking about building a large school culture and a whole school culture, also areas for performance, but also these tend to be where the cafe is. But we want to see this as being used throughout the day, a comfortable space, a multi-purpose space that really kind of unites the school and brings students together. So those are the top 10. And I just have another 2 minutes worth of things to share with you. In the upcoming workshops that we're going to be doing next week and on the 30th, we'll be talking about creating a set of guiding principles for the project. This is just one example of the West Bridgewater. We just saw that kind of plan of that building. And when we entered into the design of that building 6 years ago, these were the guiding principles that we created. So we're going to be working with the group to share other examples of guiding principles and create a set for this project. We'll be thinking about blue sky ideas and getting people to diagram adjacencies between spaces and the kind of things that they'd like to see take shape in the school. We'll be working with our architects to create what we call bubble diagrams, again, adjacency diagrams of things like the whole school or the community core or what a classroom neighborhood might look like. And we'll be developing talking points to kind of sum up everything that we've been doing within the workshops thus far and what is it most important to us to communicate to the larger community about the priorities that have been established during visioning. So that is, in a nutshell, what has been happening in the visioning so far. And Shane, did we want to open up for some Q&A now, or are we going to do that at the end?
No, I think we can, we'll open it up to Q&A on your presentation now, David. We'll do 15 minutes of Q&A and then hand it over to SMMA. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand, or you can submit them through the chat, the Q&A function. Perhaps we don't. I think a few of our attendees were also at the workshop, so they're not new to this.
Okay.
Another minute. Okay, maybe we'll move on. We can come back to it if anybody thinks of anything. But why don't we hand it over to SMMA and take a look at the existing condition surveys.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Matt, you're going to share the screen?
I will share my screen.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nope, it's set that my screen sharing is disabled at the moment. Now I can share my screen.
You can share it now?
I can, yes. All right.
Go to the next. So good evening, everybody. For those who don't know, we are a team of architects and engineers who have been on the ground over the last few weeks, both inside and outside the building, observing the flow of the building, the student flow, the traffic flow, the drop-off, looking at the existing conditions, analyzing from the site down to fire protection and lack thereof, and looking at, you know, what systems you have in place, what their life expectancy is. Under any MSBA project, we're going to examine an addition renovation. We're going to examine new construction, and understanding the existing building is important under any scenario, because if we're to renovate this building, we need to know what we're renovating, what the current condition is, and how we're going to replace stuff. And even if we're demolishing this building, we need to understand what's in that building so the cost of demolition can be accurately estimated as we move through the project. So our team is going to take you through at a very high level some of the key points that we've noticed as we move through your building and your property. And this PowerPoint will be available on the website afterwards. So with that, I'll pass it over to Erin. Take it away.
So many of these things you are aware of. They're things that you can see every day. I think it goes without saying first that the fields are in very good condition and they're very well maintained. We observed that the real only place for outdoor learning occurs in the courtyard, which is in poor condition. And we believe that's why we saw some classes actually on the oval. And also, again, keeping this big picture, there's a general lack of pedestrian circulation around from the school to these great field resources. So that means that it seems if students and community members are going from the building to the fields, that they have to navigate through parking lot and vehicular areas instead of kind of a priority dedicated space for pedestrians. Flip to the next slide, Matt. There's some photos around. We observed morning drop-off and afternoon pickup. Seems to be some inadequate parking provided for both visitors, and maybe you need to reassess what's provided for students and staff and teachers. Bicycles as well. Undersized and in poor condition loading area. Next slide. We are in the process of completing some various evaluations like wetlands and traffic, but we have performed 17 geoprobes on both the high school site, the Beasley Oval site, and the baseball field. They show kind of a range of materials from fill to topsoil organics, and in about half of the tests they hit either bedrock or rock or cobble. So we'll continue to keep these things in mind, and as we begin to develop about new options.
All right, I'm Ben Williams. I'm speaking for our structural engineer tonight on the structural systems. Generally, during his visual inspection, walking through the building, and his review of his existing drawings, he found that the structural systems are generally in very good, or good. They're in good condition. Looking at the diagram on the right, the 1960s is represented in red. It's a cast-in-place concrete system, joists and beams and columns and so forth. And the 1970s represented in yellow. It's a steel framing system. Generally speaking, all of those would have to be reassessed for modern codes, including things like wind and seismic, and that would be assessed with the existing condition, especially as we approach the different options. Surveys throughout the building didn't see any major structural cracking. A few areas where some spalling at the top of precast spandrel panels, or where water intrusion caused some cracking where repointing is needed, for example, at the chimney. Next slide, please. The building enclosure, there's two main pieces of this that we consider. You want to make sure that your enclosure is insulating the building well and that water is not able to intrude. In both instances, we saw major deterioration at different aspects of the project. The roof had membrane, areas of membrane, water had infiltrated underneath or is being retained. Seams are falling apart. Flashing is falling apart or it's past its life. Thermally, the insulation throughout the walls and the roof systems aren't really up to snuff to high performance buildings like we see today. So the mechanical systems just aren't able to keep up with the heat loss. Window framing systems are failing. They're not thermally broken as you'd expect in modern day conditions, and sealant joints and so forth are all failing. Sills are failing at the joints, and water is able to negatively impact the existing frames. So they're all in need of replacement. Next slide, please. Safety and egress conditions throughout the building. The building needs to be separated by specific types of firewalls to ensure that fire or smoke or even proper lockdown scenarios are able to be undertaken in the school. Right now in classrooms, corridors, stairwells, they're just not adequately separated. Different aspects of the egress, the leaving of the building, the incoming into the building are not adequately dimensioned. Things like guardrails, handrails, even the way that the shape of the stairs are created or do not meet requirements of today. Landings leaving the building, generally speaking, do not transition properly for a person in a wheelchair or even a person with a cane to transition adequately to the sidewalk or to the walks around the building. There aren't enough elevators around the building. Many of them don't go where you need them to take you. And generally speaking, the cabs themselves don't fit what they need to fit. Next slide, please. General education spaces, thought to kind of point these out as their typical use throughout. In the 1960s area, the red area from before, you mainly have masonry partitions. They're in good condition, as we said, structurally. They do show some examples of staining in certain instances. You have spline ceilings and asbestos-containing material in the floor that needs to be removed. 1970s building are similar masonry partitions, ceiling tiles, hard flooring. In general, the materials all are poor acoustically, which is something that we've seen throughout the building in other ways too. Movable partitions that were previously installed were not used properly or didn't properly separate for sound, or open spaces were separately partitioned off later and do not properly separate spaces for proper educating to occur. Also, some of the furniture and the equipment in the classrooms don't operate as they need to support the future forward learning that we're starting to install into schools today. Window shades, operable windows, that open up with different methods to bring in fresh air. None of those systems are operating properly. They're in poor condition and generally stick or just don't do what you need them to do. Next slide, please. Bathrooms and locker rooms, a lot of these things you probably have had direct relationships with in one way or another. A lot of the toilet fixture mounting heights just don't meet reach requirements that you would expect for a person in a wheelchair or a handicapped individual with a cane. Toilet compartments just aren't quite big enough to meet some of those requirements. Over the years, expectations for what locker rooms are supposed to do for the population in a school have changed, and the current locker rooms don't meet the needs of students. The field house in general doesn't meet accessibility requirements, and a lot of the facilities are in poor condition and in need of replacement.
All right, thank you, Ben. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about the MEP and fire protection systems as well. As Lorraine mentioned initially, we did have our engineers crawling through. I'm just going to give a summary of their findings on those systems. And the general takeaway before I get into individual systems is really that most, or if not all, of the systems that we find in the building today are really installed originally as part of the construction, either in 1960 or as well as the 1970s additions. And therefore, they are 60 or 50 years old. And as one would imagine, in many cases, those systems have now really reached the end of their usable life. There are some scenarios where things have already been replaced across the various engineering disciplines, but in general, these are systems that would need complete replacement as part of any new renovation project or new addition renovation project that would be undertaken. So very quickly, just on the electrical systems, the main switchboard that you see there in the top right-hand corner is something that you can't get parts for anymore today. I mean, it is still functioning, but it is on relative type of life support. The generator systems, again, they're original. One of them has been switched out from the original oil to gas, but the equipment itself is still very dated in terms of what its functionality is. The fire alarm system, again, it's connected to the original zone systems, but the specifics that are not compliant with current codes. The lighting within the building is not sort of modern LED lighting. It is fluorescence, which has a sort of lower efficacy to it. And then in terms of the switching, all the light switches are manual in nature. There is no lighting controls to help achieve a higher level of lighting efficiency and energy efficiency. On the HVAC side, this is another area where we're seeing that a lot of the original equipment has certainly exceeded its lifespan. There are some new boilers that were replaced, and when you walk into the mechanical rooms now, you do see a mixture of the original non-functioning equipment as well as some of the new. But even some of those new pieces of equipment, venting, or breaching, as we call it, that goes from those boilers out is already showing some signs of rust and deterioration. So even the newer systems have some challenges associated with them. There's some oil tanks that were associated with the original construction that are underground. They will play into some of the renovation work or remediation work that ties into the site work that Aaron was discussing earlier. Chillers, controls, then pumps, as well as distribution piping, all has deterioration associated with it. Again, there's various chillers located throughout the building serving different needs. Some of them do require repairs, and there's some verification to make sure that things would be functioning in their optimal manner. The unit ventilators, things that are providing sort of fresh air into the classrooms, again, at that sort of end of life expectancy. Fin tube radiation heating systems throughout, again, air systems, including the ductwork, rooftop equipment, as well as exhaust, again, all original in nature. On the plumbing side, the newer pieces of these systems are really domestic hot water heaters that are, again, less than 5 years old. But some of the venting there as well is showing some level of distress. But the rest of the domestic water piping, hot, cold water piping that circulates throughout the building, original. The gas piping is a little bit newer in general in terms of having fed the newer generator or connected to the old generator in newer fashion. Sanitary and storm piping, again, original to the building, has significant deterioration. And then, as Ben mentioned, the plumbing fixtures, both in terms of water efficiency as well as accessibility, are out of date with current construction standards and codes. In terms of the fire protection system, it is original to the 1970s vintage construction, is when it was installed. That puts the overall life of it really near the end of its life expectancy. There are 3 different water services that come in to feed that fire protection system. So we would look to consolidate those as part of any construction project. And really, this is a system that is certainly a candidate as for a necessary replacement as part of renovation work. Then lastly, we wanted to mention something a little bit different that we've been doing, but still in the spirit of the existing conditions survey work. We have had a drone operator from SMMA out on site a few weeks back when there was a nice overcast day. And what they're doing is actually taking not just photographs. Photographs, I think, from drones are things that we're all familiar with. But currently what we're able to do is generate model geometry from that photograph. It's called a photogrammetry model. And what this allows us to do is bring a high level of realism and sort of accuracy in terms of the context to any of the representations that we're going to be showing the community moving forward. So it gives us the ability to look from above, certainly great surveyability to the roof, but it's a heightened level of photo documentation that we conducted a few weeks back. With that, I'll turn it over to Helen to run through just the next steps that we have coming.
Great. Thanks, Matt. So as David mentioned, he's previewed for you the next 2 educational visioning sessions, which are coming up on the 16th and the 30th. In addition, so we've got educational visioning, but we've also been engaging directly with department heads, with athletic director, music director in the school as part of educational programming. So we did spend a week with those people and got to hear firsthand what their needs are. We'll continue to wrap up some of the survey work. We are still engaged with the traffic survey, the actual physical land survey, as well as the wetlands flagging. And then in addition to the programming and the visioning, we're going to do a spatial analysis of your existing spaces and compare them to what the guidelines that the MSBA has given us. That'll allow us to really understand where the shortcomings are spatially in the building. Then we'll start to do the fun part, formulate conceptual design options. These are very high level, very general, but it'll, again, give us a chance to engage with the parts and pieces that we need to put together to give you a new project on the various parts of the site. So we'll be doing some test fitting there. And then finally, we're going to come back to you. The next community forum is on December 8th. And we'll look forward to reporting on our progress from now until then. Do you have any questions on the survey work or on the educational visioning? We're happy to open it up.
Thank you, Helen. Yeah, again, folks, if you have any questions, please raise your hand, or you can submit them to the Q&A function. Quiet group tonight. I think again, some of you were at the PBC School Building Committee meeting last week, where SMMA presented their findings. And there's a lot more work to do. This is just the beginning of it.
And may I offer? I think we're going to have on the website the agendas posted for what we plan to present at the building committee meetings. So I know these times might not be convenient, but if the community wants to log in and watch the building committee meetings, they can get a sense of what we're going to be discussing at those meetings ahead of time.
Yep. Okay, I think if there's no questions, we'll wrap it up. As David and Helen and Lorraine said, please check our website for upcoming public meetings. The next one is our visioning workshop number 3, which is happening on November 16th. There are links to that on the website. Next public building committee meeting is November 18th. Again, we'll post the agenda for that. Then we have Ed Visioning Workshop number 4, which will be the final one on November 30th. Another School Building Committee meeting on December 2nd. And then the next public forum number 1 will be December 8th. So five public meetings coming up in the next month or so. Please check the website, Wakefield's mhsproject.com. We will list all the public meetings on there. We'll list the agendas and the information to log into the Zoom meetings. So unless anybody has anything else, we'll call it a night. Appreciate everybody coming tonight. Thank you, David. Thank you, SMMA. And thank you, Ryan from WCAT for hosting us tonight. Thank you. Good night.